It is time for Stories from STYX, Part 2. Yes, I'm sitting on the floor today. I promised I'm not injured, but I've had some weird health stuff going on, and I've been really extremely tired lately, and so I'm being lazy. I'm sitting on my floor. At least I'm in front of the bookcases. But we're moving on to Stories from STYX, Part 2, or Volume 2. I don't know if they're called volumes or parts. I believe I heard the subtitle is The First Echoes, which means nothing to me. I don't know what that means. So let's see here. Again, I know there are visuals, but I'm going to be going for strictly audio first because I want to be able to really listen and digest and hear the lyrics. Well, you know what? At least I'm going to look at the track list. Let's look at the track list. See if this gives me a clue. Achilles' Lullaby. I hear lullaby and my brain immediately goes to two places, which has nothing to do with mythology. I mean, I guess technically it kind of does, but it's not related to Greek mythology either. Like, either I go to for those who know, the phenomenal animated film, The Prince of Egypt. I think of the beautiful lullaby that's, you know, hush now, my baby, be still, love, don't cry, and how that continues and weaves its way through. And then I think of a song, this is quite an, oh my god, this song I think is over 20 years old. It was called Mordred's Lullaby. It's by Heather Dale, I think is her name. And I just remember this song because it made its way through the Vidding community at one point when I was on there in the 2000s. So I think of that song, which is, again, it's actually a dark song. It's not a very sweet song, which is like Morgana's or Morgan's like attitude towards her son Mordred and how she's gonna foster this hatred for Arthur in him. And it's a great song if you haven't ever heard it before. Like, it's really beautiful. Love it. But Achilles' Lullaby, okay. Ooh, I might have some fun stuff to talk about with that. Cheating Death, I'll never be full, give me a wife, don't you run, oh, Eros. Okay. My thought, with the exception of the bookended tracks, basically the first and the last, which, if Achilles' Lullaby, if I'm thinking, I mean, both the lullabies I mentioned are a mother singing to their child. If this is Thetis singing to Achilles, I have an idea of what it's probably covering. Again, I'm gonna have some fun stuff to talk about. And then Don't You Run, O Eros, which Eros' main myth involves him and Psyche, or Psyche, which doesn't really have to do with the underworld that much, other than Psyche ends up becoming the goddess of, like, the soul. Her name actually means, like, soul. So there's that. But the other three, Cheating Death, I'll Never Be Full, Give Me Tartaros. If I'm right, all three of these songs involve very famous myths of heroes/kings who did something really fucking stupid which got them in trouble. Although technically, Give Me a Wife, if it's what I think it is, Tartarus isn't involved, but you stuck in the underworld while living. Cheating Death, if I had to guess, we are talking about Sisyphus, who's a very slippery character of Greek mythology. Probably the slipperiest. And he got off on trying to make the gods look stupid, which you just kind of look at and go, buddy, you were just asking for the one-way ticket to Tartarus at that point. I'll Never Be Full, if I had to guess, and this would coincide very well with a lot of stuff we talked about in Iliad Book Club recently, that's Tantalus. Very famously, he killed his son Pelops, chopped him up into a bunch of bits, made him into a soup, and fed him to the gods. It's also the very beginning of the bloodline for the curse of the House of Atreus. Yeah, Tantalus and Pelops. That's them. Because Atreus and his brother Thetis are actually children of Pelops. Pelops also he ends many people's lives. No, he lends his name to the Peloponnese and the Peloponnesian and, like, that whole area. So if I had to guess, I'll Never Be Full is Tantalus. Again, that's referring to his punishment in the underworld. And then Give Me a Wife. I swear, Casper, did you give me Theseus and his idiot friend Pirithous? This is one of the dumbest things you will hear in mythology. It's Theseus, yes, Theseus of the Minotaur and everything else, and his idiot friend Pirithous, who I don't know who's more dumb in that moment. I'm gonna lean at Pirithous because they both decided they deserved like kind of divine wives or wives who were in some way related to the gods. So Theseus went and kidnapped a very young Helen of Sparta before she was married, so she was not yet eligible to be married yet. So he basically stole a kid, kidnapped her to Athens, don't worry, her brothers got her back, and kidnapped Theseus' mom while they were at it, which was kind of the quid pro quo, if you will, of that day. Pirithous decided, I deserve Persephone. Yeah. Look, again, there's a reason I just always call him and his idiot friend Pirithous, because you just go, how did you really think that was gonna work out for you? And they both get sort of trapped in the underworld until Theseus is able to be released by Heracles, but Hades and Persephone do not allow Heracles to basically rescue Pirithous. They're like, oh, no, that motherfucker stays. That guy ain't leaving. Okay, so it's interesting because, again, the middle 3 tracks seem very focused on like characters who very famously end up kind of trapped, like doing something really stupid and end up punished by the underworld, we could say. Achilles' Lullaby and Don't You Run, O Eros, if I'm right about what either of those are about, kind of are outliers. So I'm really curious, like, what generally the overall theme is supposed to be, because at first glance I would go, oh, big idiot Greek heroes doing big idiot Greek things. Oh, this will be interesting. Okay. So then let's kick off with Achilles' Lullaby.
Not every union twixt daemon and man.
Twixt daemon and man. Oh, so like daemon. Not the word that probably would have been used. So Thetis, if we're talking specifically Thetis and her marriage with Peleus, who is Akhilleus' father, who becomes king of Phthia. It's like PTH. It's kind of odd for me to try and pronounce. I think it's Phthia. Thetis is a Nereid, so these are like sometimes called nymphs, minor goddesses. She's a daughter of Nereus, the kind of so-called old man of the sea, one of his 50, I believe, Nereids. They're all descended from Okeanos, so she wouldn't get called a daemon. That word is very specific. It is spelled here Daemon, which of course my brain always goes to like demons, as it's pronounced in the His Dark Materials series. But a daimon. Actually, you know what? No, I'm wrong. I can readily admit when I'm wrong. I was thinking of later things. So daimones, daimon is actually another word sometimes used to describe like forces of nature, for divine forces, minor gods, even sometimes the Olympians. I double checked. I double-checked some notes I'd taken that actually I do believe the gods atop Olympus are at one point called daimones or daimones by Homer. So it is another word for God. I think it's because it's so often later on when you then have the rise of these monotheistic religions, especially Catholicism, when all the offshoots of Christianity and everything else, it comes to take often a very negative connotation when generally it doesn't. It's sort of a divine will, spirit, a force. So okay, never mind. I correct myself. I apologize, Casper.
Sends beyond violence or kings grasping hands. Enter Thetis, a Nereid queen, and Achilles, a babe blessed by forces unseen. As I carry you here by the heel.
Okay. Oh, we are doing the story that I think we are. Oh, this is going to be fun. I am not going... this is going to be fun because this is where we get into the tricky area of what happens when Rome enters the chat. Thetis, a Nereid queen. She is a Nereid. She becomes queen because she marries a king, Peleus, and Achilles, a babe blessed by forces unseen. To a degree. If you go with his initial written appearance, which is the Iliad, they'll say you're blessed by the gods. Like you have these talents, you're a good runner, you're a good fighter, all these things, blessed by the gods. Yes, because you are descended from the, like most of these, frankly, heroes and kings are. It's almost like a prerequisite. You have to somehow have a god in your bloodline. In his case, his mother is the Nereid. As I carry you here by the heel. Okay, this is where we get really nerdy and we start getting very specific. Because here's the thing, again, this is even more so. We had this talk in Iliad book club because obviously Achilles enters the chat in book 1, so you have to talk about him. Achilles in his original traditions and his oldest traditions is not immortal in any way. The thing of the heel, not a thing. He's literally just an extremely good fighter, and he's extremely quick. So he's described often with like running metaphors and similes, and he's known as, swift-footed Achilles. And yes, he is, gotten in his heel while fighting. Now let's remember how you have the Achilles tendon area back there. If that gets ruptured in any way, you are down like a bag of rocks in the dirt. You're not moving. You're down, and if you're down, you're a sitting duck, you're a target, you're dead. And and you would need to fully reattach that surgically. No way were they able to do that in Bronze Age Greece. They just did not have the skills or the equipment to do that. You were dead. You were essentially a dead man walking. And hence Achilles is then a dead man. The idea of his supposed almost we'll call it divinity, this kind of I am invincible save for my heel, I'm almost like immortal save for my heel, this one weak spot, does not have any written appearance until the 1st century CE, and it's a Roman writer named Statius and his unfinished epic called the Iliad. He never did finish it. I believe he died while in the middle of writing it. So we don't even know if this has an earlier mythic tradition. We don't even know if it's got even an earlier Greek mythic tradition. Because again, Statius is not like, say, Hyginus, who writes his Fabulae, which he writes in Latin, but he's an ethnic Greek, right? And he makes it clear, I'm talking about the Greek mythology. Now, the characters of the Trojan War have a lot of crossover into Roman myth because they see themselves as descended from this character of Aeneas, who's this mythological figure who's a Trojan. But Statius was an Italian. He was a Roman. He was born in Naples. He wrote in Latin all his life. Like there's no Greek connection here. So you can't start trying to say, oh, but he's like Hyginus who makes it clear I'm writing about the Greek mythology. I'm just doing it in Latin. Not so with Statius. Even more so. There is technically an earlier account of Thetis trying to make Achilles immortal. That comes to us from Apollonius of Rhodes in the 3rd century BCE in his work, the Argonautica, which I believe is the only surviving Hellenistic epic that we have. Except it's not the idea that we dip him in the river Styx to make him immortal and he's held by his heel. Instead, Thetis basically smothers him in ambrosia, like anoints him in ambrosia, and drops him on a fire. You think I'm kidding? Drops him on the fire, and that's supposed to burn away his mortality. Unfortunately, her husband Peleus runs in and catches her, is horrified. She said to literally just like throw infant Achilles. Like she's just like, well then I'm out, bye, and leaves. This is told in 10 lines in the Argonautica, in book 4, I think. It's very brief, and it never says that he actually then has any sort of divinity or invincibility from it. It's an attempt at it, but it's never said that it in any way even partially succeeds. So the idea of Achilles then having some kind of divinity doesn't come until Rome enters the chat and you have a Roman poet trying to write a Latin epic. So we're left in this position because we don't have any written Greek works that say, hey, Achilles was invincible except for his heel because his mother dunked him in the river Styx. We don't have that. We have no written record of it. Was it in the mythic tradition? So we don't know. We don't actually know if it was even in the Greek mythic tradition. We don't even know if it was some kind of mythic tradition. We know for, at this point, we'll say air quotes fact, that it's not in the Homeric tradition, one of the earliest written accounts we have of Achilles as a, mythic character. That's not in there at all. It's not a part of the Iliad. It's not even a part of the entirety of the epic cycle, which includes the lost epics that, we no longer have. That whole cycle of them, the only 2 that survived in their entirety are Homer's, which is Iliad and Odyssey. All the others, which are written by other writers, we have in summaries and a couple scattered lines across the place. None of them mention this idea for Achilles. So it is either a kind of invention by Statius. Maybe there was something else there, but we don't have any record of it. And this may sound really nitpicky, but I think it's important when you get a character like Achilles and people think they know a lot about Achilles. They think they know all the things. Now, let's also understand that the Greek mythology, Hellenic polytheism, through times would undergo shifts and changes. You'd see adjustments in the mythic tradition. You know, characters can take on multiple roles. In the case of Achilles, I do think it's interesting that one of the most famous aspects, this idea that he's invincible save for his heel, the whole thing of his mother dipping him in the Styx, none of that comes to us from Greece. It comes to us from Rome. I find that fascinating because I go, huh. So this song is going to be Roman propaganda, Casper. No, it's not. Honestly, Statius wasn't that bad. That's Virgil. Virgil is that bad. But okay. Seems we are going to be doing the idea of Thetis dipping him in the river Styx, holding him by his heels. So, fun facts, Casper, that comes from Rome. Gotta love Rome.
You were fated to ward off our terror. Every soldier and peasant will kneel for Achilles, and they will remember.
I love the vocalese. There's an airiness in the tone that's so nice.
Stepping onto the beaches of conquest, valiance, an unspoken vow. His power, their redemption, the mortal Greeks best. Every kingdom and ruler will bow.
Okay. I will note something then also. Because of the fact that she wants to make him immortal, this actually plays a great role in the idea of kleos and the ethos of the Greek hero, because he can't be the mortal Greeks' best if he's immortal. At that point, he doesn't qualify, right? And here's the interesting thing. I mean, they talk about him being the best. He is a name we will remember as part of his destiny, but he has to die in order for his name to be remembered. And then stepping onto the beaches of conquest, his power, their redemption. Is he their redemption? He is their problem. Let's be real. Achilles is nobody's redemption. He's their problem. And here's the interesting thing about Achilles. We talked about this, especially because obviously book 1 of the Iliad, which opens with that famous word, manin, rage, this almost divine rage. And how it just opens with Achilles erasing himself briefly out of the narrative and throwing a big tantrum. If Achilles did not phone a mom, and mom did not then pull her massive divine IOU with Zeus, Achilles is nothing. Because without the Iliad and the plot of the Iliad, Achilles is nobody. He's nothing. Without the Iliad, what has he done? Ooh, yay, you sacked some cities on the way to Troy? Good for you, pumpkin. So did a lot of Greek heroes. You know, a whole 1,000 ships worth of them. That's so cute, pumpkin. And without Thetis going to Zeus and saying, my son feels incredibly slighted, you know, you owe me big, FYI. So can you make it that the Greeks will suffer horrible losses and they basically then beg to have Achilles back? Without Zeus basically stepping in that way, Achilles is just angry in his tent. Next. You don't have the suffering. And let's be real. Because of Achilles getting that angry, phoning his helicopter mom, and mom basically going to the ultimate school principal and saying, you better make sure my son, you know, gets all of his game time or whatever. Tons of Greeks die who maybe didn't even need to die. Yes, year 9 of the war, lots of people have died. You're expecting more will die. But there is a huge amount of people who die who maybe might not have died if Achilles had not done what he'd done. And again, without the Iliad, Achilles is nobody. He's nobody important. He's done nothing prior to Troy. And that includes the whole expedition to Troy. So prior to Troy, which includes them, you know, raiding a bunch of cities on the way to Troy. Before that, he's done basically nothing. Not a thing. Like, I'm sorry, sir, you are not Agamemnon and Menelaus, who went and conquered their ancestral seat of Mycenae, and then if you're Agamemnon, continued on with more conquest. You are not Diomedes, one of the Epigonoi, who went and sieged and sacked Thebes to avenge his father. And he was with several other heroes while he did it. The Epigonoi are the children of the Seven against Thebes, which was kind of this big Greek civil war that happened in the mythology. I'm like, you're not Nestor, who was an Argonaut, and like has done, and part of the Caledonian boar hunt and plenty of other, like, you are not Telamonian Ajax. Like, who the fuck are you? He talks a really big game, and this is where I go, look, him and Agamemnon are basically, in the opening of the Iliad, are basically having a, my war crime is bigger than your crime, I'm gonna put it on the table and measure, me, like, fight. And again, I laugh about it, and I'm very flippant of it here, but for the Greeks, this was very deadly serious, like, kind of argument they're having, because this is cutting at the core of who they are and what they believe, their ethos and their mores. So, but Agamemnon basically says, good for you, you have all these gifts bestowed by the gods. I don't see us on the other side of that wall. So what have you actually brought to the table, my dude? It's been 9 years. If you're so good, why are we still on this side of the wall? That's why, arguably, the most important character to the story of the Iliad, which is the story of Troy, is ultimately Odysseus, because it's not Achilles who's gonna sack Troy. He's dead before they sack Troy. It's not Achilles who's gonna do that for them. It's actually Odysseus. So, a lot of these are really beautiful lyrics. I will say, in the context of what the Greek hero is and how the hero functions, some of them are a little discordant, because Thetis is essentially being the extreme helicopter mom. What she wants is for him to be immortal. She doesn't want him to achieve this kind of glory, the kind of glory he gets in battle, the kind of glory he gets in the Iliad, because he only gets that because he will ultimately die. And the Iliad knows this. Even though the Iliad does not show us the death of Achilles, it's constantly foreshadowing it. It's making it clear that by the end of this plot, Hector's going to be dead. Achilles is going to be dead really soon after that. And he knows and understands this. Again, the Greek hero is chasing that perfect death. He's chasing Kleos, a thing he can truly only get after he's dead. So if she dips him fully in the river Styx, and he is fully immortal, and he's one of the Theoi at that point, or a daimon, he's not going to have the kind of Kleos that she's essentially singing about here. Because he won't ever die. He will then be very much in stasis. He'll never even really develop or grow in the way that we think of people develop and can learn to change and learn from their mistakes, because you have consequences when you're mortal. The greatest consequence being that you die. If you're immortal, you never suffer that consequence. That's why the gods always seem like they never change, because they don't. They have no reason to. They're immortal. What's the biggest consequence they suffer? Nothing really of note. So anyway, sorry. I'm trying to say that, I mean, one, musically, this is very beautiful. And the singer's voice is so pretty, haunting even. So Casper, I'm slightly lecturing a little bit, and I am very in the weeds and kind of nitpicky, and this is stuff that just comes from being a super nerd and reading. I live on the website JSTOR, which, if anybody has never gone to it, JSTOR. It's a repository of tons of academic, like, articles and journals and all of that. And I currently have been living in the Homeric section for a good while there. I've encamped myself there, specifically in the Homeric section, but I live there. I read that for fun. Yes, I'm a nerd, I know. Anyway.
Blessed upon battle, a lion's mane. When Hector is slain, true to still, to yet spare the cattle.
I love this part. I wondered if it would ever pull higher. That part. I keep waiting for it to go a little higher. That is a tune from somewhere. My brain is clearly recalling a tune from somewhere. Not this. which is why it keeps expecting it to go up, but this is beautiful. And the vocalise done by the singer, there's a beautiful breathiness in her tone and an airiness that is so difficult to do. It really is, because you're essentially losing air when you do it. So to maintain a clear sound while still having that kind of breath, it's extremely difficult. So major props, and I can hear every time like the core and everything is engaged, and it's very beautiful. I love this melody, and just A+ on casting of the singer. Whoever is singing Thetis, my hat off to you. Beautiful work. But okay, may the fates be witness, Olympus blessed upon battle, a lion's mane when Hector is slain. I love the lion's mane. I'm assuming that is potentially a reference to a very famous quote from the Iliad, which, if you've seen the 2004 movie Troy, which parts of it I like, but I also have so much beef with that movie. Don't talk about me how they massacred Helen in that movie. I can't talk about it. There's a but Brad Pitt gets to deliver the line in that film, which is ripped straight from Homer, and that is, there are no pacts between lions and men. It's this deal. It's because Hector, realizing, yeah, I'm gonna have to one-on-one duel Achilles, happening in the heat of battle, he tries to say basically, look, let's, as with kind of, as he says, almost like gentlemanly warfare, let's make it so whoever kills the other, you let that person's friends come and take their body so that they're not left, for carrion, they're not left to be picked off by the enemy. Like, let's have a little bit of civilized, bit to the warfare here. And Achilles at this point is in the heat of his absolute divine wrath, and all of this anger that initially had been focused on Agamemnon and the Greeks, he has now turned on Hector, because Hector essentially insulted his ego by killing Patroclus. There's a whole long, talking in the territory of what does the death of Patroclus mean, is deep ego death for Achilles. Because Patroclus goes out and functions as a proxy of Achilles. He's essentially a proxy of Achilles' kleos, of Achilles' honor and his ability. So when Hector kills Patroclus, to Achilles, that's a deep insult. Because it's like, so you think you're better than me because you've killed my proxy, the guy who was essentially being my stand-in out there because I didn't want to go fight. I was still moping in my tent. That pisses him off deeply, because now this is not just words, this is actions that have been done. So he becomes even more enraged. Now he's very laser targeted on Hector and really the Trojans in general, but Hector. So the duel is coming. We build and build and build to the fight to Hector, which we know is coming, and it comes in predominantly, it's the real explosion, as we say, the orgiastic explosion of violence that is Achilles finally taking the battlefield, is books 21 and 22, I think. Sounds about right. It's you spend basically the whole epic with Achilles just in his tent, sulking. He hits the battlefield in 21-22, and I think it's 22 that really has the death of Hector in it. And again, he has this thing, there are no pacts between lions and men. Lions and that kind of imagery does get used a bit with Achilles. So I like that little reference to a lion's mane, and very specifically following it with when Hector is slain. I'm assuming, Casper, you're throwing a little nod to that very famous line from Homer, which, let's be real, Homer cooks, okay? Let the man cook. I say the man, the poet, Homer. I use Homer for ease. Homer writes some lines that are devastatingly beautiful, that absolutely you go, oh damn, that are so good. Again, we recently did book 3 of the Iliad, which you might as well just call the roast of Paris. It is unrelenting in roasting Paris, and let me tell you, Helen pops off at Paris in a way that is so chef's kiss good. And then also Menelaus, who does not speak much at all in the Iliad. He gets some lines there, and ooh, he has some bars, and you're just like, damn, man, this ancient Greek, this dude knew how to write, man. It's so good. And shrewder yet still. But shrewder yet still to spare the cattle. Is that saying, he's good at, not killing the air quotes innocents or something, we'll say? He's dead before they sack Troy, so you can't count that. You can't. He does, let's be real. When Achilles hits the field, again, he's in berserker mode. If you are a Trojan, you can't even run out of his way. He will chase you down and kill you. He jumps in the river to kill a bunch of Trojans because they're running away from him. And then the river's like, bruh, chill the fuck out. And so he starts trying to fight the river. This man is not shrewd in any respect. He's not trying to spare anyone. He's out of his mind with just rage and fury at the point that he hits the field. Because again, he's suffering from deep ego death. And he can't psychologically handle it, so he just goes bonkers. And it is a frenzy. It's like, you'd say just get out of his way, but if you're a Trojan, you can't even do that. He'll chase you down to kill you. So I don't know if I can call him shrewd. He's not that shrewd. If anyone is shrewd, it's Odysseus. Odysseus is pretty shrewd, but we know this.
Hades, bear witness.
Okay.
I beg these waters bless him.
So this is
Let the river of souls shield him.
STYX.
No arrow, no weapon, no man, no god shall mark my boy. Protect him, please. Hold your breath, my son.
Ooh. What's that whistle? It's like a flute of some kind. This is a percussive instrument, I think. I mean, it's likely a synth, but it's mimicking a percussive instrument. It's beautiful. Ooh, I love me that build at the end. I love a big dramatic build at the end. I'm a sucker if I'm a sucker. Okay. Love that. Again, there was a bit in the last bit before that big build, it sounded, I called it a whistle, but it sounded almost like a very airy, almost like pan flute sort of type. It was very high, and it was perfectly in sync with her, that I couldn't quite hear it. It was just high enough that I'm like, oh, what is that? I will also say, in terms of mixing, I like the mixing thus far more than I liked the mixing of the Hades and Persephone album, which again, like for me, and this is very personal taste. This is just like, there's nothing wrong. It's just like, I prefer hearing the voice a little more atop the mix. And in this case, I thought it was beautifully mixed. This was beautiful. I did keep waiting for her to go higher. I don't know what melody I'm thinking of. Clearly, like there's clearly a buried melody somewhere back in my head that keeps waiting for her to go higher. But she doesn't. Beautiful voice though. Wow. Lots of beautiful stuff here. Again, there's a lot of beautiful references. And I only nitpick when I'm talking specifically about like the ethos of the Greek hero and the stuff that she's singing about and how what she's doing is actually directly antithetical to that. How what she's doing ultimately would erase all of that because then he can't die. And if again, he cannot die, he can't get all that good kind of kleos that she's singing about because he only gets that in death. And again, the no arrow, no weapon, no man, no god shall mark my boy. Again, this is all coming from Statios. This is coming from us in the 1st century CE. This is the earliest written account of it. So, and that's coming us from Rome, which is almost ironic, you'd think. But could be reflecting, obviously, changes towards how they viewed heroes. Because if you think of, the great sort of Roman mythological hero is ultimately Aeneas, who, good God, the Aeneid is so boring. It's like, it's got a couple moments that are fun, that are like good to read. Famously book 2 and 4 are kind of the ones that get referenced the most. Book 2 being the fall of Troy. One of the most famous accounts of it comes from the Aeneid. It is staunch anti-Greek propaganda, good God. But it's a fun account to read. It's admittedly kind of fun to read. It's got a lot of famous lines in it. And then book 4 is the Dido and Aeneas sort of tragic romance and how that she's queen of Carthage and kind of how that turns out. Other than that, good God, Aeneas is the most boring fucking hero on the planet. He's so dull because his thing is that he's just too noble and too good. That's his flaw. Rome, that's boring. Nobody cares. I want my messy Greek men with their messy Greek feelings. I want them to basically all be pieces of shit. In a modern context.
Like, look, I want them to be all flaming dumpster fires of people so that I can like them and then go, look, hear me out. Yes, they've got problems, but I like my Greek heroes. They gotta be a bit of a hear me out due to their behavior. But then you get STYX writing this about Achilles. And Achilles is so famous for the fact that he gets so angry, but his anger, because it sort of gets backed by the gods, ultimately then feels very justified. Right. So it is interesting that you then get a Roman writer who, again, writing in the 1st century CE, not that long after or around Virgil, who's writing the Aeneid in like the 1st-ish kind of century. It is sort of fascinating that, you know, he seemingly creates this mythos, this idea that, you know, no arrow, no weapon, no man, no god shall mark my way, that he becomes truly invincible save for his heel. Because again, if you go back to the Argonautica, where there's the different version of Thetis trying to give him immortality, invincibility, we never get confirmation that even in a smidgen it works. And again, in the Iliad, this is not a part of the character of Achilles. Does nobody hurt him? Well, sure, he's not on the goddamn battlefield for for over 20 of the 24 books. He's not even fighting. Of course he doesn't get hurt. He's not goddamn there. Granted, if you also want another hero who basically doesn't get hurt on the field of Troy and absolutely kicks ass and doesn't have a god, like, helping him out in any way on the battlefield, Telamonian fucking Ajax. That's right, the bulwark of the Achaeans. That man, they call him a brick house. His nickname would be Fridge. Like, good God, you just can't stop that man. I love me Telamonian Ajax. He makes me sad. I like him more than Achilles. I find Achilles academically interesting and fascinating to dissect as a character. I would want to slap him across the face so hard if I met him. I cannot even begin to tell you. Paris is still the worst, though. Paris is the absolute fucking worst, but man, I want to bitch slap Achilles so bad. So yeah, again, anything that I'm like, most of what I'm talking about is very nitty gritty, like kind of detail about the Greek hero and the ethos and how that all plays together and why ultimately this move by Thetis never could succeed. Because if it did, would Achilles be memorable? Probably. Would we have the Iliad? No. Because Achilles is really only known because of the Iliad. If the Iliad doesn't happen, Achilles ain't shit. And the ironic thing is that while the plot, as we say, so let me give some definitions real quick, because I realize I say plot and story, and while I've explained this in other places, plot, capital P, the events of your narrative. What happens in your narrative? The plot of the Iliad. Achilles gets mad. Plot only ends when he's no longer mad. That's the plot. Other stuff happens in there, but that's the main plot. Your story. What is your narrative about? What are, we're talking the themes, the good details, the juicy stuff. What is your narrative about? The Iliad, just by its title that we have now, the story of Ilion, the story of Troy, the story of the Iliad is not just about Achilles being mad. It's about how it's this obsessive foreshadowing of the downfall of Troy. So many other things are important in the Iliad in terms of the story of the Iliad. And if you look at the story of Troy, Achilles ultimately is not the most important player. He's not. Odysseus is, actually. The great irony. Odysseus is. Because he's the guy who comes up with the Trojan horse stratagem. Achilles is never going to stack Troy. He's never even going to see the inside of it. So you don't need Achilles. You need Odysseus, the great irony, because he gets thrown some really unfair shade in the Iliad by Agamemnon. Agamemnon's got some personality problems, to say the least. But yeah, no, I'm now also trying to think of how this song fits with the others. Because it does seem, we mentioned May the Fates Be Witness, and she's singing about the future. And again, the great irony is that this great future she's singing about for Achilles, if she made him immortal, would never happen. It wouldn't. Because, again, you need the Iliad, and he needs to be mortal for the Iliad, right? I mean, at this point, if I'm looking again at the Iliad in that respect, some of the big conversation is the idea of fate and free will and the will of Zeus. And when I say free will, I kind of mean the free will of mortals, like, that is an extremely huge conversation and, I mean, academic debate we don't have time for in any respect. But ultimately, remember this, in a way, about Greek myth, at least especially in Homeric myth, but Greek myth. Free will versus, like, kind of rigid determinism, so the idea of fate determines everything. The free will of mortals plus fate, and in that way also plus the will of Zeus, which does kind of also exist outside of fate. Because we'll say fate is sort of like what the universe almost is deciding in a way. They all exist uncomfortably together and they interact with each other in a way that doesn't make it easy to say, well, this is because of XYZ. Well, oh, that's because of fate. Or, oh, it's because of that. Like, yes and no. People still kind of get to make choices and move around within that and have personalities and things they say or do within that. But then you do also want to blame fate because it does seem that fate does inevitably sort of come to pass. Again, they exist extremely uncomfortably. These what's our favorite phrase? Philosophical irreconcilables. These ideas exist super uncomfortably with each other. They are always in conflict, rubbing up against each other, kind of bashing each other's heads. And even things that say Zeus wants to happen can be derailed by human behavior. In a way, there's a very famous example of that in book 2 of the Iliad, which is kind of, it's almost amusing for a hot second before it all gets righted and back on track. So that is so interesting, because then it makes me think of, like, is this then sort of about fate and free will? But I'm not really sure, because when you get to stuff like Sisyphus and Tantalus and Thetis and Pirithous, if that's who those 3 middle songs are about, fate is not as much of a factor. Punishment is. The what the fuck why were you fucking around and finding out with the gods is interesting.